folks just need to admit and acknowledge that, hey, I'm not loving what's going on right now, and don't beat yourself up over that.
And I think the problem is people waste so much time.
Time is the most precious resource that we have.
Wow, mic drop. That was amazing. What's up, guys? Welcome to the On Track with Annie podcast, which is all about going after what you truly want in life. Before we start this podcast, make sure you give this podcast a rating and review. It really helps us out. So today's guest is Alan Stein Jr. Alan is a corporate performance coach and world-renowned speaker. He spent more than 15 years working with the highest performing basketball players on the planet. Alan delivers high-energy keynotes, interactive workshops, and impactful full-day trainings to help organizations improve performance, cohesion, and accountability. He inspires and empowers everyone he works with to take immediate action and improve their mindset, habits, and productivity. Alan teaches how the same strategy that elite athletes use to perform at a world-class level can be utilized in business to build a winning culture. I'm excited to have him on today's podcast, and stay tuned. Hey, Alan, how are you?
Doing well, Annie. How are you?
I'm doing well. How's it going? Where are you located, by the way?
I live just north of Washington, D.C. I'm in a suburb of Maryland.
Oh, awesome. I have some clients that are from there. How do you like it?
I love it. I've been here my whole life, so I'm rather accustomed to it. But yeah, DC area is a good area.
Have you been in the same city your whole life or just same state?
For the most part, same general area outside of college. I went to college down in North Carolina for 4.5 years, but other than that, I've been here.
Nice. Is your family there?
Well, they've all moved. So I did grow up here, and then my younger brother moved down to St. Augustine, Florida, like 15 years ago, and then my parents retired and moved down to Myrtle Beach just over 20 years ago. So I'm the last of them left.
That's awesome. So I have seen a lot of your podcasts and the things that you talk about, which I love. So my podcast is all about kind of like going after what you want in life, achieving success, and kind of just reaching the next point in your life. So I think that fits perfectly with what you do. So you've worked with a ton of high level athletes. You've worked with Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Kobe Bryant, so many more. And you've helped them achieve a level of success and kind of help them level up. So tell me a little bit about your background with them and kind of what you did with these athletes starting out.
So for context, my first passion in life was basketball. Okay. And I fell in love with the game at 5 years old when my parents signed me up for my first recreation basketball experience. And I'm really grateful that here 4 decades later, basketball is still a major passion of mine and is still a major pillar of my life. And I'm very thankful that I've been able to build a life and a living off of something that I love. And that love for basketball has taken many iterations. For the first third of my life, it was as a very dedicated basketball player. I was able to play all the way up through the collegiate level. I played at Elon College. It's now Elon University, but in the 90s, it was Elon College. Nice. And while I was at Elon, I started to develop an equal love for training, for fitness, for strength and conditioning, for performance work, for mindset, for nutrition. So when I graduated from Elon in the late 90s, I figured what could be better than combining my original love of basketball with this newfound love of strength and conditioning and fitness. So I decided to become a basketball performance coach and did that for almost 20 years. I primarily worked at the youth and high school age level, but then had opportunities to work with some NBA players and do some pretty cool things. And then the most recent iteration was in 2017. I decided to leave the basketball training space entirely and become a corporate keynote speaker. And that's what I do at present. But I'm really drawing on the lessons and the strategies and the routines and habits and disciplines that I learned from the game and learned from elite level players and coaches. And I now show folks how to apply those same principles in their lives and in their business. So even though I'm far removed from the training space and my playing days, I still feel very connected to the game because those are the lessons that I teach.
What do you think is the link between the mindset of people that have done, sports growing up as a kid, leading into success with their career?
Well, when you look at athletics, obviously there is a physicality component. Like in order to ascend to playing in the NBA, for example, there's a requisite level of athleticism, of skill. I mean, you have to be able to have the physical tools to even have a chance. But outside of the physical tools, it really is all mindset. And one of the reasons I love the work I do now in the business world, if you will, is that physicality component is rather irrelevant. I mean, I still believe people should take care of their physical bodies, and it's in all of our best interests, to eat well and to exercise and to get sleep, because that helps us in many different ways. But at the end of the day, you can be successful in business, whether you're 5'2" or 7'2", whether you can dunk a basketball or you can't jump on top of a curb. All of that doesn't matter. So really, it all comes down to mindset, to perspective, to approach, and to your belief system. So those are the areas that I try and help people level up.
So when you look at a collegiate athlete versus someone that is at the highest level in their career, what do you think is the difference between those people? Do you see something that's specifically that would be a difference?
There's a handful of separators.
Mm-hmm.
The three that I tend to tout the most, I've been around and been able to work with and observe and work alongside elite level players in basketball. And now with this new career, elite level players in the business world. And I've noticed that all of them share three components or three traits. Number one is they have a strong respect for the fundamentals. They understand that the best never get bored with the basics. And whether someone is trying to be, an aspiring NBA player, or someone wants to be the best sales professional at their company, they get crystal clear on the fundamentals that they need to work towards mastery of during the unseen hours. And then they're relentless in working on those basics every single day. So they don't try to skip steps. They don't aim for the flashy. They aim for doing things right consistently. So that's one component that I've seen unites almost every high performer I've ever been around. The second is they learned how to blend confidence with humility. They earn the right to be confident in their chosen craft by putting in the reps, by putting in the work, by doing the due diligence, primarily during the unseen hours. The world's best basketball players are incredibly confident on the court. Well, the world's best sales professionals are equally confident, when they're having a sales pitch or a meeting or walking into a boardroom. However, they blend that confidence with humility. And humility is what allows them to stay open to coaching, is what allows them to stay open to feedback. But most importantly, humility is what allows them to realize that no matter how good they get, they know they can still get better. Mm-hmm. So even if someone is the 3-time salesperson of the year in their organization, they don't rest on that and they don't get complacent with that, because they know they can still do better. They can still beat their previous year's sales record. So they're not worried about playing the comparison game and how they stack up to others. They're just worried about maximizing their own potential and becoming the best that they're capable of becoming. Mm-hmm. And it's this blend of earned confidence with grounded humility that allows someone to continue to level up and achieve. So you've got never getting bored with the basics and embracing the fundamentals. You've got blending confidence and humility. And the third is they have a strong respect and appreciation for the process. They're goal-oriented. They have dreams, they have goals, they have a North Star that they're trying to pursue, but they focus on the day-to-day. They focus on the process. They focus on the micro skills and the habits and the daily decisions that lead to that type of outcome. And that's where they tend to put all of their focus. So they don't wake up every day just dreaming and hoping and wanting to reach a goal. They wake up every day and say, what can I do today that will take me a little bit closer to reaching that goal? And then they focus on the process and on the steps.
So going back to that, do you think there's an issue with trying to be the best? Because I feel like at a certain point, you realize that I'm never going to be the absolute best and I'm always going to want more. So do you find that there's an issue with people that are always striving for the absolute highest level?
I wouldn't say that I find an issue with it. I think everyone needs to find a mindset and an operating system that works best for them. Mm-hmm. For me personally, I don't have any desire to be the best in anything. I absolutely have a strong burning desire to be my best in all of the areas of my life that I find important. But I know other people are wired differently. Guys like Kobe Bryant clearly wanted to be the best. LeBron James has said he wants to be the best player to have ever played the game. So if that's working for those folks, then they should double down on that. I think everyone needs to figure out their mindset. So for me, the way I look at it as all I have control over is being my best. I'll let other people argue and vote and decide whether I'm the best in anything, but that's outside of my control. And in many areas, it's always going to be subjective. I mean, LeBron James is an absolute once in a generation athlete. He is remarkable. I mean, when you look at what he's accomplished, it's almost unfathomable. And yet he can't even escape the shadow of Michael Jordan. And then there's, and then there's people that think there've been other players better than Michael Jordan. I mean, it's interesting when you look at, there really is no way to measure some of these, things that folks are pursuing. So ultimately, I believe in putting my focus on the things I have control over, which is my own attitude and my own effort. And I've learned to kind of untether and let go of everything else.
Do you feel fully content at any point in your life where you're like, I feel content with what I've achieved in my success?
You know what's interesting? So I love language and I love terminology. And I know that every single word in the English language, which is the only language I speak, carries an emotional connotation, meaning you hear a word and it makes you feel something. I'm a big believer that no words are good or bad or right or wrong. It has to do with the intent in which you use them. It has to do with the connotation or the meaning, that you use when you internalize them. So for me, I am incredibly content in my life, but I'm not complacent by any means. I still strive to become a better father, to become a better speaker, to become a better author, to become a better business owner. But the reason I say that I'm content is I've gotten to a certain level of inner peace. Like I'm happy and I'm fulfilled in my life. Like I'm not yearning for anything to complete me. I've got great relationship with my kids. I love the work that I get an opportunity to do, and I'm thankful for the stages that I get to go on. So I have a contentment and a peacefulness about my life, but I'm not complacent, and I'm certainly not done, and I'm certainly not putting on the cruise control. And I hope that if you have me back on your podcast 5, 10, 20 years from now, that I will be a better man in every area of my life then than I am now. So for me, there is a difference between complacency and contentment. And that's how I define it.
And do you feel like that comes down to loving just your day to day? Like every single day you wake up and you love what you do. Do you feel like that is the reason why you feel like you're content?
That is a big portion of it. If we're going to look at language, the way I choose to define contentment, it's synonymous with fulfillment. Now, someone else might define contentment as being synonymous with complacency. So they may say, hey, I don't ever want to be content. And through their lens or that framework, I would agree with them. But for me, the one of the most important North Stars that I'm pursuing is a sense of fulfillment. It's a sense of inner peace. It's a sense of saying, I'm pleased with the opportunities I have in my life and the things that I get a chance to do. I love the work that I do. It's important to me to have a sense that I'm a being of service and I'm adding value to the groups that I work with. So for me, yes, I have a sense of fulfillment, and the point of that fulfillment is I love what I do. And I've always followed this intersection that I learned back when I was in middle school. And I'm very grateful to have learned it so early. And that's the intersection between things that I'm very passionate about and things that I love, and things that I'm naturally fairly good at and have some talent in. And the goal is to always find where those things crisscross. That's some of the best advice that I could give anyone listening or watching this right now. Find what you love, find what you're good at, find where those things intersect. And as we've already discussed, for me, that point of intersection, up until I was 22 years old, was as a basketball player. I love the game of basketball. I was fairly decent at it. I mean, I wasn't NBA level decent, but I was good enough to play in college, which by definition puts me in the upper 1% of anyone that's ever dribbled a basketball. So that was my intersection. But then when I realized that I would not be good enough to play basketball at the professional level and I needed to move that intersection, I decided to become a performance coach. Once again, it checked the boxes of something I was very passionate about and fascinated by, and something that I was pretty good at. I'm very thankful that I've always had relatively decent communication skills. I'm able to articulate my point of view, and I've always been able to teach and coach things. I've always been able to help motivate and encourage and empower others. So that point of intersection worked really well for me. And now it's moved again as a corporate keynote speaker, but the ingredients haven't changed. When I look at my job now as a corporate keynote speaker, I love what I do, and I'm decent at it. I'm going to continue to get better, but it still meets those two criteria. And, I don't know what I'll be doing 10, 20, 30 years from now, but I can guarantee you it will still meet those 2 points and they will intersect at whatever it is that I'm doing.
I love that. So one thing that you're saying, and I'm kind of thinking about this, is there's basketball player, speaker, coach. There's the one thing that someone is kind of like known for. And I think the problem now is like a lot of people are trying to do too many things. I try to do this. I'm trying to be like multiple different things. And I feel like it's important to focus on one thing if you want to be successful at it. So what do you think in regards to that? If you have a goal to be successful at something, do you feel like you need to focus in on that one thing, or is it possible to become two or three things?
It's a little bit of both. If I'm a huge believer in focus, I'm a self-diagnosed quote nerd. And one of my all-time favorite quotes is, if you chase two rabbits, they both get away. I mean, you got to pick which one you're going after, and you go after that rabbit and you grab it by the tail. Because if you try and split and you try and chase both, you're not going to get either. So I do believe in the power of focus. I think it comes down to what your ultimate goal is. If your ultimate goal is to be world-class or to be dominant in something, then for most people, they probably need to put all of their eggs in that basket to pursue that one thing. If that's not your goal, if your goal is you have multiple interests and you have multiple things that excite you and you want to try to do multiple things and you're not worried about being world-class in any of them, but you want to work towards mastery of each of them, then certainly I think you're capable of doing more than one thing. And especially if those things are somewhat aligned. I mean, I'm a keynote speaker, but I'm also an author. But the process of writing and articulating my perspective and philosophy on page is very similar to what I need to do on stage. So those things aren't mutually exclusive. They're somewhat aligned. However, I would not say I'm a world-class speaker, and I would not say I'm a world-class author, but I'm okay with that. Those are two things that are meaningful to me, two things that I actually enjoy doing and believe can add value to other people's lives. And they're two things that I firmly believe are worth my time and investment in putting into those. So I think it's a little bit of both. It's someone just needs to make the decision on what they want to do. Now, if you're talking about something highly specific, like someone wants to be an Olympic gold medalist in a specific sport, they will most likely need to dedicate the vast majority of their time and effort into getting really good at that sport, as opposed to playing 4 different sports and trying to be world class in each of those. And it's not for me to judge or say that can't be done, but statistically, I think it'd be in one's best interest to have some heightened focus.
Yeah. And I think what comes down to this too is like your daily habits. If you want to be really good at something, you got to have good habits in the day that lead you to that thing. And I think the problem is people waste so much time. Their habits are like time wasters. And that's something that a lot of people deal with. They scroll on social media, or they take too long to drive somewhere, whatever the case may be. So what would you say to these people that maybe have habits in their day that they need to fix? Maybe they don't even realize it, that are just wasting their time, and they can use their time to help reach their goal?
I love the direction you're going. I want to share something real quick. And then if this doesn't answer the question for you, then just pull on that thread a little bit more. So for context, I'm a very proud father of 3. I have 13-year-old twin sons who just started 8th grade, and I have an 11-year-old daughter who just started 6th grade. And all 3 of them are active youth basketball players. All 3 of my children have told me that they have the goal of playing college basketball. They've told me this on numerous occasions, and this isn't something that I've kind of, led the witness and told them that they need to pursue. It's something that they said they want to do. Now, I've asked for their permission for me to hold them accountable to doing what it takes to play college basketball. I know it from my personal experience because I've played, and I know it because I've worked with hundreds of players who have played college basketball. And I feel as their father, it's my job to help lay out the blueprint and be the guide to what that would take. And we had this early conversation prior to the summer. Fast forward a few months, and now that summer's over and school has started, I had to recalibrate the conversation with them. And it basically went like this. It said, I told my 3 kids, when folks ask me about you guys playing basketball, here's what I tell them. And I told my children, I want you to tell me if this is accurate. I tell them that you guys really like playing basketball, but you don't love basketball. Like when you play, you have fun and you're good at it, but you're not obsessed with being the best players that you're capable of. And I told them, I firmly believe that in order for you guys to play college basketball, you're going to have to make more of a commitment to the game. You're going to have to work on your game every single day. You're going to have to work on your fitness and your strength and your flexibility and mobility and coordination. You're going to have to work on all of the intangibles. And I said this with a huge smile and all the love in my heart, because I love my kids very much. I said, what you guys are currently doing will not be good enough to play college basketball. And I said, I don't say that to diminish you, and I certainly don't say that to discourage you. I say that because I'm trying to hold up the mirror that you understand that the commitment you are currently making is not going to be good enough to play college basketball. So you need to change one of two things. You either need to change your goal and say, I don't want to play college basketball. I just want to play for fun because I enjoy the game. I enjoy being with my friends, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love my kids unconditionally, no matter what they choose, but there's nothing wrong with them playing basketball kind of as something fun to do and as a hobby, and getting rid of the goal of playing in college. Or they have to change their commitment level. If they decide they want to keep the goal of playing in college, then they need to up their commitment level. They need to start working on their game every day. They need to have the discipline to get up in the morning and make 100 shots before school starts, and then make another 100 shots after school before their evening practice. And of course, keep up with their schoolwork and all of their other responsibilities. So it will be interesting to see what each of them chooses. I really made sure that they understood that there is no pressure for me as their father whatsoever. I love them no matter what, and I just want them to be happy. But as their father, I'm not going to let them straddle in between. I'm not going to let them say they want to be college players, but then have very mediocre commitment and work habits. So one of those two things needs to change. And it was a very positive conversation. I mean, it ended with smiles and hugs and high fives. And it will be interesting to see over the next 3, 4, 6 months what each of them chooses to do.
Oh, interesting. I love that you talk to them like this, because it's so helpful. Because I think every kid needs that. And some kids don't have it. And I think it's so important as a father to be able to talk to them like that, like a coach, but also you're their dad. So it's awesome that you talk to them like that. So I think for people that are trying to figure out which habits they need to get rid of, what is like a blueprint that someone can write down and they're like, this is my goal. Maybe they have a job. I think a lot of people listening might have a full-time job, but they have a dream of doing something else, and it's maybe their side hustle. What is like a blueprint that you could tell them to kind of structure their day to help them reach the goal without wasting time?
Well, the first thing they need to understand is how important our habits are. And I've seen a variety of different studies, but all of them conclude that about, give or take, 50% of everything we do during our waking hours is habitual, which means almost half of everything we do from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed is habitual. It's on autopilot. Each and every one of us have grooved a series of repeatable, many times predictable behaviors that we now derive comfort from. And the starting question that I ask everyone is if you were to list all of your habits, write them down on a piece of paper, what percentage of those habits are helping you? And what percentage of those habits are hindering you? What percentage of the things you do every day of your life are taking you closer to the person you're trying to be? And what percentage of those things are weighing you down? What percentage of those things are responsible for your high performance? And what percentage of those things are you doing in spite of? So, for me, it's getting clarity on how important those habits are. And then once they've done that, I encourage folks to really take a look at what they do in the bookends of their day. I mean, all of our waking hours are important, but it's been my experience, especially for those raising families and those that are, working all day, that they tend to have a little bit more control over their morning and their evening routine. What's required during the day can often be very chaotic. And many times if you're working at a company, you're kind of at the whim of what they need you to do during the day. But we tend to have more control over the morning and evening routine. And what I want folks to do is figure out how they can maximize the bookends of their day so that they'll optimize their energy, their optimism, their productivity. And I want them to fill their morning and evening routine with the things that I say fill their bucket, the things that light them up and charge them up mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, if that's appropriate to them, and making sure that that's how they're starting and ending every single day. And it's been my experience that the folks that get clarity on where it is they're trying to go, and then have the discipline and care enough to have the self-care routine to do the things that fill their bucket in the morning and evening routine, those are the ones that start seeing maximum progress immediately. But it really does come down to habits. And with all of that said, I want to make sure folks know that don't worry about perfection. Don't be stifled by perfection. There's no such thing as a perfect morning or perfect evening routine. Life is not a perfect game, but just see if you can make progress. Be inspired, by improving and tinkering with and making your current morning and evening routine just a little bit better than your previous one. And if you can do that, then you'll incrementally start to see an increase in those areas I mentioned.
So going off of this, and this is kind of like an interesting thing that I'm thinking of, is let's say they're on the path and they're being super consistent with their habits and they're, making some progress. And at a certain point, they're stagnant and they feel like this is not working. Like I'm not getting to my goal. It's been a year or whatever. And I feel like I'm not making progress. When is it time to quit? Like, when is it time to maybe change the goal or just to be like, this isn't going to work? Like, do you feel like you need to push harder at that time, or do you feel like it's time to change?
That's such a fascinating and insightful question. And I'm not trying to escape it, but it really depends on the person and it really depends on what it is that they're pursuing.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to speak in absolutes whenever possible, but I do see, slogans on t-shirts and memes and people propagating on social media, things like never quit, never give up. And the problem I have with that is the word never. Because I do think there are some things that are absolutely in someone's best interest to quit and to give up on for a variety of different reasons. But that's for each person to be able to figure out and decide. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't believe in quitting or giving up just because something is hard, or just because something is uncomfortable, or just because you don't get a certain result immediately. So I'm not talking about that. But if your goals change, if the person you're becoming or what it is you're hoping to get out of something changes, back to what I was just talking about with my children, if they choose not to pursue playing college basketball, I don't look at that as them being quitters or giving up. I look at that as them recalibrating and realigning what their ultimate goal is and saying that no longer is the goal. Something else is going to be the goal. So they'd be foolish to be obsessed and make this ultimate commitment to pursue something that they don't even want anymore. So in that case, it's okay to reshuffle the deck and to try some different things. So yeah, this mindset of never quit, never give up is an interesting one. So, but really it comes down to almost a case by case with every behavior and every person to figure out what's best.
No, I totally agree. And I think sometimes the issue is that people can get to a point where they're working and they get burned out. And I'm sure you can relate to this with athletics. For me, I felt burnt out and I was actually okay with it. I'm like, I'm burnt out, time to move on to the next thing, right? With athletics. But when it comes to business stuff and you feel burnt out, it's a little harder because you're like, oh shit, I don't really have a backup plan. Like I feel so burnt out. Like, what do I do now? So what would you say to like restructuring things if you are suffering from just extreme burnout?
Sure. Well, let's look at two different things. Let's look at stagnation, which I know you mentioned before, and then we can look at burnout. So usually when someone feels stagnant, what they're referring to is they're stagnant in their output. They're stagnant in their results. They've kind of plateaued in what it is that they're putting out in the world, whether they've plateaued on how much weight they can bench press, or they've plateaued or stagnant in how many widgets they sell every single month, whatever it may be, their outputs feel stagnant. Well, it's been my experience that if you want to change your outputs, then you need to change your inputs, because those two things are directly correlated. So the first thing you need to do is you need to ask yourself what you've been doing to yield those results. If you keep doing what you've been doing, you will keep getting what you've been getting. If you don't like what you've been getting, you need to change what you've been doing. So if you've been following this very specific bench press routine or chest building routine, and your bench press starts to stagnate, well, then you need to switch up that routine. You need to try different exercises or different sets or reps or a different way to break down your workouts throughout the week. Like, you need to do something different in order to get something different. And, also underneath those inputs are what we choose to read, watch, and listen to, who we choose to surround ourselves with. If I ever feel like, my output, and in this case, what I share on stage or on page or social content, if I feel that I'm running out of innovative ideas or creative ideas, then I just switch up what I read, watch, and listen to. I listen to different podcasts. I watch different YouTube videos. I watch different documentaries, listen to different audiobooks. So I'm constantly trying to tinker with what I'm putting in so that I can increase what it is that I'm putting out. So from a stagnation standpoint, it's been my experience, that's what works best. Start toying with your inputs. That also includes the people we choose to surround ourselves with. If you spend the same amount of time with the same people all of the time, that might be something that you want to look to reshuffle and maybe invest some new time with a new mentor or a new friend or a new work colleague, and start to learn more about their perspective or their philosophy to hopefully challenge you to shake things up. So that's on the stagnation side. On the burnout side, burnout actually occurs when what it is that we're pursuing or what it is that we're going after no longer feels aligned with the commitment that we're making, the sacrifices that we're making, the hours that we're putting in. This is one of the reasons that, Simon Sinek brought to the forefront this concept of why, and find your why and find your purpose. For most people, if they can stay very directly connected to their why and to their purpose and what drives them, then they're able to tolerate more sacrifices, a higher level of commitment, putting more hours in. Those things are still aligned and they're still matched. Those folks really aren't at risk of psychological burnout. Now, they may be at risk of physical burnout if they're not taking care of themselves, but they're not really at risk of the psychological burnout that we're talking about. But when you start to lose that why or that purpose, or you no longer feel challenged by your work, or you're no longer curious or fascinated by your work, or you no longer enjoy your work, but you're still required to put in all of these hours and make these sacrifices, that's when you're at massive risk of burnout. And very similar to what I said about my children, one of those things needs to change. You either need to reconnect to your purpose and refine your why, or pivot to something else and find a new why, just like I did when I left the basketball space to pursue corporate keynote speaking, or you need to tinker with the commitment level and the hours. Maybe you start to work a little bit less. You take Fridays off, or you take 3-day vacations once a month, or, whatever it may be. But one of those two things needs to change in order to alleviate the burnout.
Yeah. And I think it's hard too when people are like, I don't know what the next best decision is. Like, they don't know how to make the right decision, or they don't know what the right decision is. So what would you say to that with like making hard decisions to move on to the next thing, which might be your why?
Well, the personal framework I use is I try not to label things in my life as right or wrong or good or bad. I just try to look at what's the right fit for me. And I try not to put any undue pressure on that. So for me, I wouldn't worry about whether or not this is the right decision or a good decision. I'll kind of weigh the pros and cons, and I'll talk about it with my inner circle, and then I'll use my intuition and I'll go with my gut and I'll give something a try. And if it doesn't quite work out the way that I'd hoped, then I'll just try something else. I'll pivot something else. I mean, I was pretty certain and felt very confident that motivational speaking and corporate keynote speaking was something that I'd love. But if I would have dove into this pool and a year later found out that I didn't really like it, I wouldn't still be doing it now. I'd be doing something else. Now, luckily, my assertion and prediction was correct, because I absolutely love it. I love it more than I even thought that I would. So it ended up being the right fit for me. But I don't really look at anything as right or wrong or good or bad. So I think folks just need to admit and acknowledge that, hey, I'm not loving what's going on right now, or I'm not loving my work. And don't beat yourself up over that. Don't add on shame or guilt. It is okay to not be okay. It's okay to experience burnout. It's okay to admit that you don't love your job anymore. That's part of the human condition. That's not a flaw. But once you have the courage to acknowledge that, then start to figure out, well, what are some things I can do to change this situation? Mm-hmm. The last thing I would want anyone to do is to just tread water or stay on the hedonic treadmill doing something over and over that they don't like to do, because ultimately you're wasting time. Mm-hmm. And time is the most precious resource that we have. So it's really important that you get clarity on some things you can try to change. And, if we use an example of someone's working at a business and they've worked at this company for 10 years and they loved it when they first started, but now it's becoming a little bit of a drag. They don't love it. I would try and get them to reverse engineer and figure out, well, where do you think you lost the love? Has the company grown and you've lost some of the culture that you had when you first started? Maybe you have a new manager that you don't jive with near as much as the previous person. Maybe they've given you different assignments, or you're playing a slightly different role and you don't feel that you're utilizing your talents or your skill sets to the degree that you're capable of. And that's, caused you to lose some of the love. Like, see if you can pinpoint what you think has changed. And even if the answer is you've changed, that you no longer feel challenged or fascinated by that work and you want to try something else, that's totally cool as well. But just try to get some clarity on what you think is causing that. And then you can start to figure out what would be an appropriate pivot.
No, I totally agree with this. I think happiness and purpose needs to be up here. And when it starts to be here, that's when you need to make a decision to change, because you could go through 10 to 20 years where you're just treading water. And then you realize, oh shit, now I don't have time. And that's when people start to deal with depression and things like that. So I think it's so important to catch that early on, right when it starts, and then make a decision to change it. So I love what you said. So,
well, one of the other most important parts for folks to realize is having an awareness of this. Like, it's important to be aware of the signs of burnout. Awareness is always the first step to improving. And that's because we'll never fix something that we're oblivious to, and we'll never improve something that we're unaware of. So, it takes a tremendous amount of courage and vulnerability and honesty to say, you know what? I don't love my job as much as I used to, and I want to figure out why. And do some soul searching and consult with your inner circle and your spouse or your children or your best friends or your colleagues. There's nothing wrong with talking about that and facing it, because it's not going to go away. It's not going to improve unless you do something to cause that improvement. And I would just want everyone listening or watching to value themselves, value their time, and value their lives to the degree that they don't just keep doing something for years and years and decades that they don't love doing. Now, with that said, I love my job. I love being a corporate keynote speaker, but that doesn't mean every moment and every portion of this job is all smiles and sunshine. There are portions of the job that I don't love as much as others, like the traveling, for example. Spending a tremendous amount of time in airports and on airplanes and in Ubers and ordering Uber Eats at hotels, is not necessarily my preference, but it is the means to an end to do what it is that I love, which is to actually get on stage and share something I'm passionate about that I believe will help that audience. So I understand that is part of the job. So by no means am I saying that every moment of every day needs to be, puppy dogs and ice cream. There's going to be sacrifices that need to be made. You just have to ask yourself, are the required sacrifices something that I'm willing to do in order to get what I want or to do what it is that I love so much?
Wow. Mic drop. That was amazing. Love it. Well, thank you so much. Tell me a little bit about the books that you have and what's out there for everyone to purchase or check out.
Be happy to. Well, if anyone's interested in my keynote speaking, if anyone listening has a business or an organization or event where you feel I could add value, you can just go to alansteinjr.com. That's kind of the hub of everything that I do. I'm also very accessible and very responsive on social media. I'm at Alan Stein Jr. On Instagram and Twitter. And you can also find me, Alan Stein Jr. on LinkedIn. Just shoot me a DM if you've got any questions, if you want to share something, if you just want to connect. And then as far as the books, my first book was called Raise Your Game. And my second book was a follow-up called Sustain Your Game. Both of those are easily found on Amazon or Audible or wherever you get your books. And anyone that makes that investment of both time and money, I hope you enjoy them. And I hope you enjoy reading them or listening to them as much as I enjoyed writing and recording them.
Amazing. I'll put all of the links in the description below. And thank you so much for being on the podcast.
This was so much fun. Thank you.